What would you do? If after decades of service, thousands of hours in the sky, you were stopped right outside the cockpit, just because of the color of your skin? What would you do? If your lifelong dream was cast aside with one cold sentence. Captain Daniels, we need you to wait outside. That morning, Maya woke up earlier than usual. It was the first official day she would serve as a captain at one of the oldest and most prestigious airlines in America, Meridian Airlines. Wearing a crisp new uniform, the 4 golden stripes on her sleeves gleamed beneath the airport lights. 15,000 flight hours. 3 deployments in Afghanistan. Top graduate of the Air Force Academy. All those efforts had brought Maya here. But instead of a warm welcome, she was asked to leave the crew briefing room. No clear explanation. Just that someone else would be handling today's flight. And Maya was asked to step outside. This is not just a story about racism. It's a story about a person who once stood at a crossroad. Stay silent to survive, or speak up to spark change. It's the story of how one black woman pilot, standing alone, took down a powerful airline, not with authority, but with truth. In this journey, you'll witness how Maya uncovered dangerous shortcuts in aircraft maintenance. Why the silence of bystanders can be the most terrifying accomplice. And how someone with no title, no powerful allies, could make an entire industry rethink its foundations. If you've ever felt excluded, underestimated, or close to giving up, then this story is for you. Because sometimes, the most revolutionary act you can do is simply refuse to wait outside. Maya Daniels would never forget that morning. 5:30 a.m. at O'Hare Airport. She wore her new uniform. Her shirt was perfectly ironed. The golden stripes on her sleeves shone under the fluorescent lights. It was supposed to be her first day commanding a flight, a role many dreamt of. She had worked tirelessly for 2 decades to earn it. But just minutes after entering the crew briefing room, a cold voice broke the air. Captain Daniels, we need you to wait outside. No real explanation. No eye contact. Just a command, as if removing her from the picture was routine. And Maya, who had flown through snowstorms over the Hindu Kush, who had brought soldiers home from Afghan war zones, was now removed from the cockpit. Not because she lacked ability, but because she didn't fit the tradition. Racism in uniform doesn't shout. It whispers. It signs papers. It smiles politely while moving you to the sidelines. Discrimination in aviation rarely arrives with raised voices or blatant slurs. It shows up in internal procedures, in unexplained administrative decisions, in wary glances when you're the only black woman in the room. Like Maya, many believed that if you were good enough, you'd be accepted. But the reality is often crueler. You may have to be twice as good, just to be treated half as fairly. A Harvard Business Review study found that black women in technical and aviation fields were consistently rated lower than white male peers, even when they had significantly more experience. Maya was not the first. Before her, Bessie Coleman, the first black woman to hold a pilot license in the U.S., had to go to France to learn how to fly, because no American school would accept her. A century passed. The uniform might have changed, but the barriers remained. That day, Maya didn't argue. She stepped out of the room and leaned silently against the cold wall of the airport hallway. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, in silence. But within that silence, a quiet question echoed inside her. If I stay silent now, who will speak up next time? Sometimes, injustice doesn't come as punishment, but as a polite exclusion from the game. And the heartbreaking truth? Most people won't even see it. They'll say you're too sensitive, too rebellious, or just imagining things. And right there, as Maya stood alone outside the room where she was supposed to lead, This story truly began. Because sometimes, the most important flight of your life doesn't begin in the cockpit. It begins in the hallway, where someone shut you out. But what Maya didn't know at that moment was that the closed door was just the first step toward a truth far more dangerous. The airline she once trusted was hiding something beneath its gleaming aircraft. In aviation, everything has a checklist. Before every flight, pilots inspect tire pressure, fuel levels, radio signals, hydraulics. Every step, every metric, must be precisely checked. No one is allowed to take off without completing the checklist. But there was another kind of checklist. One no one acknowledged. No one ever wrote down. Yet it haunted Maya more than any she had ever held in her hands. This checklist didn't ask, "How many flight hours do you have?" It asked, "Does your name sound familiar enough? Are you someone leadership feels comfortable working with? Do people have to adjust how they talk when you're in the room?" And for people like Maya, that checklist was almost never fully checked. Maya had graduated top of her class from the Air Force Academy. Flown over 15,000 hours, across the Andes and through Middle Eastern sandstorms. She had completed 3 deployments in Afghanistan, no incidents, no complaints. She knew the approach procedures at San Francisco Airport like the back of her hand, the same airport that morning briefing deemed too complicated for her to handle. And yet, within minutes of that meeting, they decided she was not ready. You see, the issue wasn't competence. It was that Maya didn't match the image the system had grown comfortable with. When a black woman steps into a position of power in an industry dominated by white men for decades, a hidden part of the system quietly goes, "This doesn't feel right." They don't say it aloud, but they feel it. And then they justify that feeling with terms like, "Lacks internal experience. Not yet familiar with company procedures. Needs more observation." It's like a perfectly fueled, fully functional plane being grounded because of a sensor error. Except that sensor isn't broken. It's called bias. A 10-year study by MIT submitted identical pilot applications. One under the name John Miller. The other under Jamal Washington. John received twice as many interview callbacks as Jamal. Not because of skill, but because one name felt familiar. Maya had known this early on. Her father once told her, "You'll have to be twice as good, just to be seen as half as worthy." As a child, every time Maya folded paper planes, he didn't just teach her how to fold the wings straight. He reminded her, "The dream of flying is beautiful, but you better be ready to fight for it." And on that airport hallway, Maya realized that fighting for a dream didn't end when you got into the cockpit. It was a daily battle to be allowed to stay there. Not everyone great gets recognized. And sometimes, it's not because you're not good enough, but because you don't fit the mold others are used to. But your value doesn't lie in their approval. It lies in whether you choose to keep going, even when you know the playing field is far from level. That day, Maya didn't fly to San Francisco as planned. Instead, she was assigned to observe a short flight to Seattle, under the command of a veteran captain. A man known for being both sexist and old school. No promotions. No spotlight. Just a seat behind the cockpit. A place to observe. But from that very seat, the one meant to sideline her, Maya would begin to see what no one wanted her to see. A system cracking from within. And an industry risking lives, just to protect tradition. Airplanes, with their metal wings, roaring engines, and serene cabins, make us believe everything is under control. But what Maya Daniels discovered on that flight to Seattle revealed a far scarier truth. Not everything beneath that polished exterior was as it seemed. On that flight, Maya wasn't in the captain's seat where she belonged. She sat behind, under the supervision of Captain Harold Wilson. An older white man with cold eyes and a permanent smirk. He never looked at Maya when speaking. Never asked her opinion. And when Maya corrected a radio frequency error during descent, he simply sneered. One good catch doesn't make you meridian material. But amid his coldness, Maya noticed something else. Wilson was skilled. But his procedures didn't match what Maya had learned. She started watching closely. Checklists were rushed. Some steps were skipped. And everyone seemed to understand one silent rule. Speed mattered more than perfection. Maya asked a maintenance technician at the airport. Why was the cabin pressure check skipped? He just gave a tired smirk. We speed things up to make the schedule. Everyone does it. That was the moment Maya realized. This system didn't just have a problem with her. It had a problem with safety itself. In the week that followed, Maya was assigned to fly with other captains. Most followed the same Wilson-style flying. Fast, efficient, silent. She began to wonder. Were they all skipping crucial checks just to stay on time? One afternoon, Maya entered the maintenance bay as part of her internal procedure orientation. There, she met Marcus Jefferson, a black aircraft engineer who would soon become her greatest ally. They chatted about Detroit, their shared hometown. Then Marcus leaned in and whispered. Used to be 12 mandatory inspection points per plane. Now, just 6. The rest is case by case. Maya replied gently. Sounds like a time saver. Marcus half smiled. Sure. Saves time. By gambling with lives. In 2018, Southwest Flight 1380 suffered a deadly engine explosion at over 10,000 meters. One passenger died. The investigation revealed a small crack in a fan blade. A flaw that should have been caught during routine checks. One tiny crack. One life lost. All it took was one person skimming through instead of following the checklist. And disaster struck. We believe planes are the safest mode of travel, and they are. When everyone does their job right. But when profit, time pressure, and a culture of look the other way infiltrate the system. The danger doesn't lie in the engine. It lies in people. Maya began to take notes. Every shortcut. Every skipped step. Every uneasy glance when she asked questions. She didn't speak out. Not yet. But she knew. She was sitting on a ticking time bomb. And the scariest part? No one, not even the passengers, knew it was there. Each time Maya stepped into the cockpit alongside a new captain in her first weeks at Meridian, she felt like she was entering an exclusive club. There was no sign on the door. No secret handshake. But inside, everyone knew who belonged, and who didn't. They called it company culture. But really, it was the culture of a very specific group. Men who looked like each other, thought like each other, and had run the airline since the 90s. They shared the same stories, the same inside jokes, the same subtle nods. The kind that never reached someone like Maya. And when Maya began to ask questions about irregularities she noticed, the responses came back, familiar. That's how we've always done it. You're new, you'll understand eventually. Don't make things complicated. The more flights she took, the more Maya realized. Silence wasn't accidental. It was a choice. Because everyone knew what was going on. They just didn't want to be the first to speak. One time, after she noted a minor but important maintenance issue in a report, not serious, but definitely worth a second look, Maya turned to the captain and asked, "Have you ever reported things like this to leadership?" He paused for a moment, then replied, "I've got 3 years till retirement, Daniels. I don't want to get involved." His words were calm. But to Maya, they landed like a stone on her chest. In the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster, 2003, one of NASA's most tragic accidents. An engineer had once raised a warning: a piece of foam might have struck a wing. But his concerns were dismissed as overly cautious. The result? The entire crew perished. In systems that reward compliance and punish integrity, silence becomes survival. But in aviation, silence isn't just cowardice. It becomes complicity. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing in an organization isn't a few bad people. It's a lot of good people, who choose to stay quiet. And every time they do, they allow one more risk to survive one more day. Maya started seeing it clearly. The system didn't need to shout to protect itself. It only needed enough people to stay silent. Enough to not want to get involved. But Maya couldn't afford silence. She wasn't like them. She didn't have 3 years to retirement. She didn't have friends on the board. She had only one thing: the conscience of a pilot. A person who knew that skipping a technical check could mean someone never makes it home. And then it happened. On a late-night flight from Chicago to Las Vegas, Maya found something she could not ignore. It wasn't an isolated mistake. It wasn't an innocent oversight. It was a pattern. And patterns don't lie. They expose rot. That night, Maya flew with James, one of the rare colleagues who respected her. It was supposed to be an easy flight. Clear skies. Calm winds. No difficult passengers. But as Maya reviewed the maintenance log, something stood out. The date of the cabin pressurization system inspection was listed as completed 2 days ago. But when she cross-checked it against the technical log, the air filter replacement, part of the same system, was marked as not completed due to missing parts. Same system. 2 notes. Completely contradictory. She asked the maintenance staff on duty. The response? Probably an admin error. The plane's fine, don't worry. But Maya did worry. Because if the cabin loses pressure above 30,000 feet, passengers have less than 20 seconds to react. Knowing she would be criticized, Maya made a decision. She delayed the flight by 20 minutes to run a full inspection. In aviation, that's nearly a cardinal sin. Every second counts. Every delay costs money. And in the airline world, dollars speak louder than doubt. James looked at her, concerned. I've got your back. But you know someone will call you into the operations office tomorrow. Maya didn't flinch. She simply said, better a delay than a disaster. Her instincts were right. The inspection confirmed it. The air pressurization system had not been properly checked during its maintenance cycle. If she hadn't insisted on delaying the flight, there might not have been a tomorrow for someone. In 2019, a Lion Air flight crashed because the angle of attack sensor wasn't properly documented in maintenance records. 189 people died. The cause? A series of small errors that no one fixed. No one wanted it to happen. But everyone ignored their small part of the responsibility. That night, Maya sat alone in her temporary Chicago apartment. On the table lay dozens of sticky notes. Small errors, skipped steps, silent glances, whispered phrases. Isolated, they meant little. But connected, they painted a terrifying picture. This wasn't about a few careless individuals. This was a system operating wrongly, and knowingly. Somewhere inside Meridian's headquarters, someone had chosen efficiency over safety. Someone had seen the red flags, and thought, it'll probably be fine. Someone had once spoken up, and then disappeared. A single error might be an accident. 2 errors, a coincidence. But when errors become routine, that's when you know the system has accepted failure as normal. Maya realized. She was no longer just a captain. She had become an unofficial investigator. and if she wanted to save the airline, or at least the people inside it, she had to take the next step. Doing the right thing doesn't always come with rewards. Sometimes, doing the right thing puts you in the eye of the storm, with no safe way out. And Maya was standing right in the center of it. Following the delayed night flight to Las Vegas, Maya was invited to the operations office the next morning. Her meeting was with Thomas Barrett, Meridian's director of flight operations. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam a fist on the table. He simply looked at Maya with a cold, deliberate gaze and said, "Captain Daniels, at Meridian we value efficiency alongside safety. What you did last night cost us thousands of dollars and drew hundreds of customer complaints. That action doesn't align with our company culture." Company culture. The phrase echoed in Maya's mind like a bitter chorus. But she knew. Culture isn't an excuse for endangering lives. And for the first time, she responded, "Are you asking me to ignore a technical discrepancy just to stay on schedule?" Barrett paused, then replied smoothly, "I'm asking you to trust this system. If you can't do that, perhaps this isn't the right environment for you." It was sweetened warning. A door slowly closing. And Maya understood. From this moment forward, she was no longer welcome. When faced with the line between doing the right thing and preserving your career, most people choose the second. Not because they're weak, but because the system is designed to punish the brave. Those who speak up are labeled troublemakers. Those who follow the rules are branded misfits. And those who stay silent, they get rewarded. In 2020, a Boeing maintenance engineer blew the whistle on inspection failures in the 737 MAX program. He lost his job. No other airline would touch his resume for 18 months. By the time the press reported on it, the price he paid was already too steep. Maya knew the same fate could await her. If she kept going, she could lose everything. Her job, her name, her ability to fly again, anywhere. But if she stayed silent, someone else's flight might never land. There are moments when you're no longer just an individual in an organization. You become its conscience. And if you turn away from that role, the system will continue drifting toward error. That night, Maya opened the USB drive that Marcus, the maintenance technician, had quietly handed her earlier that week. Inside were dozens of reports. Falsified maintenance records. Unfixed errors. Equipment replacements not properly logged. Flights taking off without meeting safety requirements. Every line of data was a siren. She opened her laptop. Began documenting everything. Then messaged her sister, Zoe, a lawyer. "I need to talk. I think I'm about to do something there's no coming back from." Zoe came that very night. They sat together in Maya's apartment, under soft yellow lights. No longer just sisters. No longer just a lawyer and a pilot. But two women staring at the same choice. Stay silent, or spark change. Zoe held her sister's hand and said, "If you do this, you won't be alone. But you need to be sure, are you ready for the consequences?" Maya didn't hesitate. "I don't want someone to fall from the sky, just because I was too afraid to lose my seat in the cockpit." If you've ever sat on a plane, leaned back, closed your eyes, and trusted that everything ahead of the cockpit was flawless, then this story is for you. Because some flights land safely not because of a perfect system, but because someone refused to look the other way. And in this case, that someone was Maya Daniels. It was Flight 422, returning from Boston to Chicago. Clear weather. Open airspace. An afternoon like any other. Until Maya, as always, opened the pre-flight maintenance checklist. At the section for the cockpit pressure valve inspection, she noticed something strange. The last maintenance date was listed as 4 days ago. but the technical record held no notes confirming it had been done. It looked like a sticker slapped on for appearance's sake. When she questioned the technical team, they responded, "The valve works fine. Normally, we don't need to dig deep into that part." A response that sounded harmless, but made Maya's skin crawl. Because in aviation, normally is not a safety standard. One bad normally, and hundreds of lives could vanish in a single breath. She demanded a thorough inspection. And just as she feared, when they opened the part, technicians found a small crack in the valve casing. A flaw that wouldn't survive high-altitude pressure. Had the flight taken off as scheduled, and that crack burst mid-air, the cockpit could have depressurized in seconds. The flight was grounded. And as expected, Maya was summoned once again. Barrett confronted her, his gaze heavy. "Do you have any idea what this cost us?" But this time, Maya didn't need to defend herself. She placed the inspection report, complete with photos of the crack, on the table and said, "I know. But at least this flight didn't become tonight's headline." In 2005, Helios Airways Flight 522 crashed because the pressurization system was never properly checked. 121 people died. Investigators later found that all it took was one knob left in the wrong setting. Something no one noticed before takeoff. A minor oversight. An irreversible tragedy. Not all heroes are celebrated. Some simply refuse to let mistakes slide. And thanks to them, you got home safely. Without ever knowing their names. That night, Maya sat by her apartment window. She looked up at the sky, where hundreds of planes quietly passed, blinking lights across the dark. No one knew how many of those planes were flying with a small crack that the system chose not to see. No one knew how many lives depended on someone willing to stop and check, just one more time. And Maya knew. It was time to stop keeping this a secret. 3 days after the cracked valve incident, Maya knew. It was time to do something irreversible. She met again with Zoe, her sister, and attorney. And together they finalized a report over 100 pages long. The contents were damning. Falsified technical records. Shortcut maintenance procedures. Anonymous testimonies from staff. And internal emails proving that leadership knowingly ignored safety warnings. Maya sent the report to 2 places simultaneously. 1, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. 2, a senior investigative journalist at the Chicago Tribune. She didn't hide. She signed her real name. Included her employee ID. Listed the flight numbers. And made one thing clear. No one should have to hide their face to speak the truth. Within 72 hours, the media exploded. Meridian Airlines accused of covering up technical violations. Revealed, over 30% of aircraft flying without meeting standards. Whistleblower identified, airline's first black female captain speaks out. Maya became the center of attention. Not because she sought it, but because she dared. At Meridian's headquarters, the first response was predictable. Suppress. Maya was suspended. Her ID badge revoked. Her name removed from the active flight roster. In an emergency meeting, Thomas Barrett, the same man who scolded her for delaying a flight, declared, "Captain Daniels has violated internal confidentiality policies. She's damaging the company's reputation." Maya didn't argue. She placed a printed copy of the report on the conference table and calmly said, "Reputation doesn't come from your name. It comes from truth." In 2002, Sharon Watkins, a senior accountant at Enron, wrote internal memos warning of financial fraud. She was ostracized, threatened, and isolated. But after the scandal broke, she was recognized as the woman who tried to save the system before it collapsed. Maya knew the price would be high. The aviation industry wasn't as vast as the sky. A blacklist could be as short as a single email. She might lose her job, lose her future in flying. But if she stayed silent, who would speak up when the next flight falls from the sky? Systems don't collapse because one person made a mistake. They collapse because too many knew, and did nothing. Sometimes, it takes just one person to step out of line, for the whole machine to stop and look at itself. 1 week after Maya's submission, the FAA launched an independent investigation. The findings were shocking. Over 40% of Meridian's aircraft had unresolved maintenance issues. Thousands of flights were delayed. Stock prices plummeted. And for the first time ever, Meridian issued a public apology. As for Maya, she didn't get a thank you letter. No flowers. No plagues. But she received something more powerful than any award. Trust. Meridian Airlines had once been a proud name in American aviation. A symbol of tradition and reliability. But within 6 weeks of Maya's whistleblowing, that name vanished from the skies. After the FAA released its investigation, Meridian violated systemic safety protocols, including evidence of falsified maintenance records, administrative negligence, and retaliation against whistleblowers. The results: operating license suspended indefinitely. Senior leadership under criminal investigation. The company filed for bankruptcy protection. The scene that day: workers dismantling the Meridian logo from the front of the headquarters, became a symbol of something larger. Collapse doesn't come from a single crash. It comes from years of silence. And Maya? She didn't celebrate. She sat quietly at a cafe across the street, watching the crowds pass. Across from her sat James, the one colleague who had believed in her from the start. His eyes were red from a sleepless night helping the press team organize the story. "You know," James said, "I used to think we couldn't change anything. But now, they're rewriting the checklist from scratch." In the weeks that followed, 6 major U.S. airlines announced complete reviews of their maintenance procedures. The FAA passed a new set of whistleblower protections, with heavy penalties for retaliation. For the first time ever, an independent oversight committee was established to monitor airline safety compliance. 1 week later, Maya received a letter from the FAA. "We invite you to serve as an advisor on the Civil Aviation Safety Oversight Board. Because we need people who don't look away when they see something wrong." Sometimes, systems don't change because of moral awakening. They change because someone forced them to see themselves through the eyes of someone brave. And once silence is broken, those who heard it can no longer pretend they didn't. Not long after the Meridian collapse, Maya returned to the skies. This time, with a new airline, Atlantic Airways. The first airline to publicly invite her back into the cockpit. But what made this return even more meaningful was the person sitting beside her. Tasha Williams, a young black female pilot, who had nearly quit the profession because no one believed in her. As they prepared for takeoff, Tasha glanced over and said, "You're the reason I'm still here. If you hadn't stood up, I would have walked away." Maya smiled, looking out the window. The sky stretched wide. Clouds glowing softly. Sunlight glinting off the cockpit glass. "The sky doesn't care who you are," she said. "It only asks, do you have the courage to keep flying?" That autumn morning, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner cruised gently above Chicago's layered clouds. In the cockpit, Maya Daniels gripped the yoke with steady hands. The sunlight warmed her shoulder, glinting off the 4 gold stripes on her sleeve. A captain's mark. Beside her, Tasha scanned the dashboard with laser focus. A quiet determination lighting up her smile. "You know," Tasha whispered, "when they told me I didn't fit the company culture, I almost believed them. But then I read your story. And I thought, if someone had the guts to speak up, the least I can do is stay. Maya didn't answer with words. She simply reached out, placed her hand on the controls, and gave a small, firm nod. At 35,000 feet, surrounded by sky, Maya knew. Her fight didn't end with Meridian's downfall. It was only the beginning. And now, it wasn't her fight alone anymore. In the months following the crisis, Maya was appointed advisor to the FAA, became a guest speaker at flight academies, and helped design recruitment programs to diversify aviation training pipelines. She never called herself a hero. She just told the truth, in the most honest way she could. As she once testified before Congress, in aviation, the sky forgives many things, but it never forgives lies. Since the Meridian scandal, 3 major airlines introduced blind recruitment processes, where resumes excluded names, gender, or ethnicity during the first round of evaluation. As a result, the number of female and minority applicants advancing to interviews nearly doubled. Atlantic Airways created a full scholarship fund, the Maya Daniels Scholarship, covering aviation school tuition for women from underrepresented communities. But of all the recognitions Maya received, none touched her heart like a small handwritten note. It was slipped quietly into her folder after a guest lecture at a flight academy. On the torn edge of a notebook page, written in blocky pen strokes, it read, "Dear Ms. Maya, thank you for teaching me that the sky has no locked doors. I'm going to fly. And I'm not going to ask anyone's permission to do it. Jordan, 12 years old. Sometimes, the most radical thing you can do, is refuse to wait outside. Because the sky was never meant to belong to a privileged few. It belongs to anyone brave enough to rise into it. Armed with truth, guided by integrity, and anchored by the unshakable belief that you belong." Maya Daniels isn't a symbol. She is a human being. Someone who once trembled before speaking, felt alone, and doubted herself. But she reminded the aviation industry, and all of us, that everyone has a cockpit of their own. And one day, we each will face a moment of choice. Stay silent, or speak. Speech balloon. Have you ever been told you weren't the right fit? Ever stood outside a door, wondering if you deserved to be inside? Then remember Maya's words. The sky belongs to all of us. And if you find the courage to walk through that door, you will never be alone. You may not be a pilot. You may never fly through cloud banks or command a jetliner. But someday, you'll face a decision that defines your path. When that day comes, choose what's right, not because it's easy, but because it lets you face the mirror without lowering your eyes. And if this story touched something in you, leave a message. Because your story might be the one that inspires the next person to speak up.